The grand chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with an unusual amount of chatter, punctuated by occasional bursts of laughter. The massive holographic display at the center of the room showed what appeared to be rocks. Not rare minerals, not quantum crystals, just ordinary Earth rocks, stacked rather inelegantly into what the humans called a wall. Admiral Vex Brightclaw stood before the assembled council, his crystalline scales shimming with barely contained irritation. His tail, adorned with ceremonial rings denoting his prestigious rank, twitched sporadically. "Honorable council members," he began, his translator struggling to convey the mix of amusement and disdain in his voice. "What you're looking at is not, as some might assume, an archaeological remnant. This is, believe it or not, humanity's current idea of defensive architecture." The laughter grew louder. A council member from the Zentari Federation wiped a gelatinous tear from one of their 7 eyes. "But surely, Admiral, this is some sort of joke? These primates stack minerals and expect them to serve as protection." "Oh, it gets better," Brightclaw continued, flicking through the holographic display with a wave of his scaled hand. "They dig trenches. Actual holes in the ground. And here's the most amusing part, they fill these holes with sharpened sticks. Sticks. A species that has barely mastered rudimentary spaceflight thinks they can defend themselves with pointy pieces of wood." The council chamber erupted in another wave of laughter, but it died quickly when an aide rushed in, whispered something to Brightclaw, and caused the Admiral's scales to fade from their usual brilliant blue to a pale, almost white shade. "What is it?" Admiral Council Elder Luminara asked, her bioluminescent tendrils pulsing with concern. "You look as if you've seen a void specter." Brightclaw cleared his throat, an unnecessary gesture he'd picked up from studying humans. It seems our latest surveillance drones have been detected and neutralized." The chamber fell silent. "Impossible," someone whispered. "Our stealth technology is based on quantum displacement. They shouldn't even have the theoretical framework to detect such technology, let alone counter it." Brightclaw's scales shifted to a deeper blue as he composed himself. "The humans didn't detect our quantum signatures or track our subspace emissions. They noticed unusual bird flight patterns around their bases. They observed that local wildlife was behaving differently in areas where our drones were present. Then they just started throwing rocks at empty air until they hit something." A counselor from the Mechanoid Collective literally sparked with indignation. "That's not science. That's not even logic. That's just. The effective Elder Luminara suggested, her tendrils now pulsing with an amused rhythm. "Perhaps we've been approaching this all wrong. Admiral, please show us the footage of how they neutralized our drones." The holographic display shifted to show a human military base. A group of soldiers were indeed throwing rocks at seemingly empty air. There was a clang followed by a shimmer as a drone's cloaking field failed. But instead of celebrating their discovery, the humans had already moved on to setting up what appeared to be a crude net made of local plant fiber, weighted with more rocks. "They're treating our advanced reconnaissance technology like pest control," Brightclaw said, his voice a mixture of horror and unwilling respect. "They've begun putting up these nets everywhere, claiming they're for bird protection. They're using our own stealth against us. We can't avoid the nets without revealing ourselves, and we can't run into them without losing drones." Elder Luminara's tendrils were now pulsing with barely contained mirth. "So, Admiral, what you're telling us is that while we've spent the last 3 centuries perfecting quantum stealth technology, these humans have defeated it with sticks, stones, and a basic understanding of local wildlife." That's not even the worst part," Brightclaw admitted, his scales now shifting through various shades of embarrassment. "They've started selling the footage of our drones getting caught as UFO evidence to their entertainment networks. They're making money from our failures." The council chamber remained silent for a long moment before Elder Luminara spoke again. "I believe, Admiral, we may need to seriously reconsider our assessment of human defensive capabilities. Perhaps there's something to be said for what did you call it? Their primitive approach." Brightclaw's tail dropped its usual proud arch. "With all due respect, Elder, I believe we may have seriously underestimated these Deathworlders. Their ability to adapt and overcome using the simplest tools at hand is unsettling." "Indeed," Elder Luminara agreed, her tendrils now glowing with a thoughtful blue light. "Perhaps it's time we stopped laughing at their stone walls and started asking why they've survived this long on a planet that should have killed them eons ago. 2 weeks after the council meeting, Major Jack Stone stood in the rain, mud seeping into his boots, reading what had to be the most ridiculous diplomatic message in human history. The holographic projection flickered as raindrops passed through it, making the alien text dance. "Let me get this straight," he said, running a hand through his rain-soaked hair. "The Galactic Council wants to have a fortress-building competition. With us, the species they just called, and I quote, rock-stacking primates with delusions of adequacy." Commander Rex Thunder, standing beside him with an umbrella that was proving absolutely useless against the sideways rain, grinned. "Oh, it gets better," read the stakes. Stone squinted at the projected text. "If they win, they get to install their defensive systems on Earth for our own protection. And if we win, wait, they'll share their FTL technology with us." He looked up at the stormy sky, where somewhere beyond the clouds, alien ships were probably watching. "This has got to be a joke." "No joke," Thunder replied, finally giving up on the umbrella and letting it blow away. "They're dead serious. They think this is their way of graciously helping us primitive beings. Admiral what's his name?" Bright Claw, Stone corrected automatically. "Right, Bright Claw. He's convinced their quantum plasma whatever shields are so superior that this contest is just a formality. A way to make us accept their help without losing face." Stone walked to the edge of the cliff they were standing on, looking down at the valley below. The location chosen for the contest was a geological nightmare, a convergence of 3 tectonic plates creating a landscape that seemed designed by a drunk artist with a grudge against flat surfaces. Earthquakes were a weekly occurrence. The weather changed faster than a politician's promises, and the ground was a complex layer cake of different rock types that would give any foundation engineer a migraine. "They really don't get it, do they?" Stone mused, watching as another landslide carried away a chunk of the opposite hillside. "They chose this location thinking it would handicap us." Thunder laughed, a sound almost lost in a convenient crack of actual thunder. "They chose this spot because their sensors showed it was the most unstable, most challenging terrain on any inhabited world they've encountered. They think we're crazy for even having outposts in areas like this." Stone knelt down, picking up a handful of mud and letting it squish between his fingers. The aliens had given them 3 months to build their fortress, the same time they'd take to construct their own. Both structures would then undergo a series of increasingly difficult tests. "You know what this mud is telling me?" Stone asked, a slow smile spreading across his face. "That you need to wash your hands. It's telling me that this whole valley is basically one giant flow zone. The kind of place where anything rigid and inflexible." He paused as another minor tremor shook the ground. Anything like, say, a high-tech alien fortress with static shield generators would be fighting against the landscape every second of every day. Thunder's eyes lit up with understanding, while something that could move with the land. "Exactly." Stone stood up, already running calculations in his head. "Get me every combat engineer who's ever built in earthquake zones. Find anyone who's worked on flexible foundations in Japan. And I want every single person who's ever restored a medieval castle on the phone yesterday." "What are you thinking?" Stone's grin turned predatory. "I'm thinking it's time to show our alien friends why humans started building with stone in the first place. And why we never really stopped." The next day, the official challenge began. The alien delegation arrived in a ship that looked like it was made of liquid metal and starlight, touching down with all the delicacy of a butterfly landing on a flower. Admiral Brightclaw emerged, his scales now a confident gold, flanked by a team of engineers who carried devices that probably cost more than Earth's entire military budget. Stone met them wearing mud-stained boots and carrying a notebook made of actual paper, which seemed to physically pain the alien engineers. "Major Stone," Brightclaw said, his translator making his voice sound like smooth honey with an undertone of condescension. "I trust you understand the terms of our competition." "Oh, we understand," Stone replied, not bothering to hide his smile as another tremor shook the valley. "Just one question, though. These tests you're planning, they're going to simulate real combat conditions, right?" "Of course," Brightclaw replied, looking mildly offended. "We will test both fortresses against the most advanced weapons in the galaxy." "Great," Stone said, making a note in his decidedly low-tech notebook. "And just to be clear, there's nothing in the rules about using the terrain itself as part of the defense system." Brightclaw's scales shifted to a confused purple. "The terrain? Why would you?" He stopped, consulted with his engineers, then continued more cautiously. "No, There are no such restrictions, though I fail to see how that's relevant. Oh, it's very relevant, Stone said, looking up as the rain finally stopped, revealing a rainbow that arched over the valley like nature's own force field. You see, Admiral, humans didn't survive on this death world by fighting against it. We survived by learning to work with it. He pointed to where his team was already unloading equipment, not high-tech machinery, but simple tools that would have been recognizable to builders from 1,000 years ago, alongside modern survey equipment and geological sensors. You're about to learn why every human culture, on every continent, figured out how to build with stone, and why those buildings are still standing thousands of years later. Stone turned to walk away, then paused. Oh, and Admiral, you might want to invest in some good boots. It's going to be a muddy 3 months. 1 month into the challenge, the alien construction site looked like something out of a science fiction fever dream. Hovering construction drones zipped through the air in perfect formation, their quantum manipulators weaving strands of exotic materials into impossibly graceful structures. The ground itself seemed to shimmer beneath their foundation generators, which were supposedly stabilizing the volatile terrain through localized space-time manipulation. Chief Engineer Crick Starweaver stood at his command console, his 4 arms dancing across holographic interfaces as he orchestrated the construction. Magnificence demands precision, he announced to the gathered human observers, his translator barely keeping up with his excited chirping. Observe as our AI systems calculate the optimal configuration for our 37th layer of quantum crystalline barriers. The humans watched, some taking notes, others trying not to roll their eyes, as a new layer of what looked like liquid diamonds emerged from specialized fabricators. The material caught the sunlight and scattered it into rainbow patterns that would have been beautiful if they weren't so painfully gaudy. Notice how each molecule is perfectly aligned through quantum entanglement, Cricks continued, either missing or ignoring the humans' less than impressed expressions. This allows our defensive screens to maintain coherence even under extreme stress. We call this our Impenetrable Immortal Barrier System, or IEBs for short. One of the human engineers coughed in a way that sounded suspiciously like BS, but Cricks was too engrossed in his work to notice. The alien fortress was rising like a chrome and crystal phoenix from the unstable ground. Its main structure resembled a massive geodesic dome, but with angles that seemed to bend in ways that hurt the human eye to look at. Plasma conduits pulsed with barely contained energy, powering shield generators that could supposedly withstand the impact of a small moon. And here Crick said, practically vibrating with pride, we demonstrate our adaptive response system. He pressed a sequence of controls, and the entire structure shifted, its surfaces flowing like quicksilver to present different geometric patterns. The AI can reconfigure our defenses 10,000 times per second, making it impossible for any weapon to find a consistent weak point. Admiral Brightclaw, who had been watching from a hovering observation platform, descended to address the human observers. I trust you're taking careful notes, he said, his scales glowing with smug satisfaction. This level of technological achievement represents 10,000 years of scientific advancement. The materials alone. His voice trailed off as another earthquake, stronger than usual, rocked the valley. The alien fortress's response was immediate and impressive. The entire structure flexed and flowed, its AI systems compensating for every tremor. However, a few of the human observers noticed something interesting each time the building compensated for a shock. The power requirements spiked visibly on Cricks's monitors. As you can see, Brightclaw continued, pretending he hadn't just stumbled during the quake. Our systems are perfectly adapted to handle any planetary instabilities. Now, please direct your attention to our next feature, the Quantum Predictive Defense Grid. The air around the fortress suddenly filled with a web of shimmering lines, like a spider's web made of starlight. These sensor threads can detect and analyze any incoming threat before it even reaches our outer perimeter. The AI then calculates the optimal defensive response and implements it faster than the speed of thought. As if on cue, a small rock slide started on a nearby slope. Before the first pebble could reach the fortress's perimeter, the quantum web flashed, and a series of precisely calibrated force fields diverted each stone around the structure. Impressive, isn't it? Cricks asked, all 4 arms crossed in satisfaction. We've even programmed it to handle multiple threats simultaneously. Observe. He initiated what was clearly a prepared demonstration. Hovering drones launched a variety of projectiles at the fortress: plasma bolts, kinetic penetrators, even what appeared to be a small antimatter charge. The defense systems handled each threat with elegant efficiency, neutralizing them in increasingly spectacular ways. And for our final demonstration, Brightclaw announced, we will show you our crown jewel, the Temporal Reaction Enhancement Network, or TREN. This system actually predicts threats before they occur and begins countermeasures in advance. The gathered humans watched as the fortress seemed to ripple, parts of it reacting to attacks that hadn't happened yet. It was, objectively speaking, an incredible display of advanced technology. Even the most skeptical observers had to admit that the aliens had created something unprecedented in human experience. As the demonstration concluded, Brightclaw and Crix stood before their creation, bathed in the light of its various force fields and energy matrices. This, Brightclaw declared, is the pinnacle of defensive architecture. Not a single stone or primitive material in sight. Pure energy, pure technology, pure perfection. The human observers politely clapped, though a few were whispering among themselves about the increasing frequency of power spikes they'd noticed during the earthquakes. Remember, Crix added, practically glowing with pride, this is merely the basic structure. We still have 2 months to add our more advanced systems. As the humans filed out after the demonstration, one of them paused to look back at the alien fortress. Just then, another tremor shook the valley. The fortress handled it perfectly, of course, but the power readings on the external monitors spiked so high they briefly turned red before Crix hurriedly shut off the display. The human observer smiled, made a note in their tablet, and walked away whistling. After all, it didn't matter how advanced your technology was if you couldn't keep it powered up. And this valley had a lot more earthquakes coming. Meanwhile, the alien fortress stood gleaming in the sunlight, its quantum shields rippling with power, its AI systems processing countless calculations per second, looking for all the world like the ultimate achievement in defensive architecture. And perhaps it was on any other world but Earth. While the aliens were busy weaving quantum fields and programming AI systems, Major Jack Stone's team was doing something that made Admiral Brightclaw's scales turn a fascinating shade of perplexed green. They were digging holes. Lots of holes. Are they planning to hide underground like primitives? Brightclaw asked, watching from his observation post as hundreds of core samples were taken across the valley. What the Admiral failed to understand was that these weren't just any holes. Each bore sample told a story written in layers of rock and soil, telling tales of ancient earthquakes, landslides, and geological pressures. The humans weren't just digging, they were reading the landscape's autobiography. Stone stood in what would become their foundation, surrounded by an unlikely mix of experts. To his right, Dr. Maya Torres, a renowned seismologist, was excitedly pointing at different soil layers like a kid in a candy store. To his left, master builder Hamish McPherson, a fourth-generation Scottish castle restorer, was running his hands over the rocks with the tenderness of a parent checking a child's temperature. "Look here," Maya said, pointing to a particular layer. "This entire valley moves like a giant wave machine during quakes. Fighting that motion would be like trying to stay dry while swimming." Aye, Hamish agreed, his thick Scottish accent making the aliens' universal translators glitch. The old builders knew this. That's why the castles that survived centuries were the ones that worked with the land, not against it. Stone grinned as he watched a team of Japanese earthquake engineering experts comparing notes with medieval architecture historians. In another corner, indigenous builders from the Andes were deep in conversation with modern structural engineers about the precise angle needed for their base stones. Right then, Stone announced, clapping his hands to gather everyone's attention. "Time to show our alien friends why humans have been building on this death trap of a planet since before we invented writing." The next few weeks were a symphony of what appeared to be chaos to their alien observers. While the aliens' construction site hummed with the elegant precision of quantum machinery, the human site looked like a bizarre combination of ancient ritual and modern science. Huge blocks of locally quarried stone were being shaped using a mix of traditional techniques and modern precision tools. But instead of fighting the unstable ground, the humans were incorporating it into their design. They built their foundation like a series of interlocked boat hulls, designed to flex and move with the earth rather than resist it. "What primitive madness is this?" Crix asked, all four arms waving in distress as he watched the humans deliberately include gaps in their structure. "They're leaving weaknesses everywhere." What the alien engineers saw as weaknesses were actually carefully calculated flex points, designed to absorb and redistribute force. The humans weren't building a fortress that would stand against the Earth's movement, they were building one that would dance with it. The outer walls rose in a pattern that would have looked familiar to any student of Earth's castle-building cultures, but with crucial modern adaptations. Each stone was cut to precise specifications, creating a complex three-dimensional puzzle where every piece could move slightly without compromising the structure's integrity. "Look at them," Brightclaw scoffed. "They're not even using power tools for some of this work." Indeed, some sections were being fitted by hand, with master stonemasons tapping blocks into place with wooden mallets, listening to the sound to ensure perfect seating. This wasn't primitive technology, it was knowledge refined over thousands of years, passed down through generations of builders who had learned to read stone the way musicians read notes. The fortress began to take shape, but not as a single structure. It emerged as a series of interconnected buildings, each designed to move independently while maintaining their collective strength. The design borrowed from sources as diverse as Incan earthquake-resistant architecture, Japanese pagoda construction, and European castle engineering. "They're using water as a building material," Crix exclaimed in horror, watching as the humans incorporated a series of channels and pools into their design. "Aye," Hamish replied with a knowing smile. "The Romans knew a thing or two about hydraulics. Water doesn't compress, you see. Properly channeled, it's better than any shock absorber you could build." As the weeks progressed, the human fortress took on an organic quality, but not in the flowing, high-tech way of the alien structure. This was organic like a mountain was organic, each part growing naturally from the last, every angle and curve serving a purpose born of centuries of hard-won experience. Modern technology wasn't absent, it was just used differently. Instead of quantum shields, they used advanced materials testing to ensure each stone's strength. Instead of AI systems, they used computer modeling to perfect their ancient techniques. Instead of force fields, they used modern seismic dampeners in strategic locations, integrated so naturally into the structure that they were almost invisible. "But where are their weapons?" Admiral Brightclaw demanded during an inspection. "Where are their defense systems?" Stone patted a seemingly ordinary wall. "The whole building is a defense system, Admiral. Always has been. The angles of these walls aren't for show, they're calculated to deflect force. The step terraces aren't decorative. They break up attack vectors and channel force away from critical areas. Even the gardens we're planting serve multiple defensive purposes." The Admiral's scales shifted to a confused purple as he watched humans planting trees and shrubs around their fortress. Vegetation? As defense. "The roots will help stabilize the soil," Stone explained, not mentioning the other advantages of having dense foliage around a fortress. "Plus they're pretty. We find that helps morale." By the time they were nearing completion, the human fortress looked like it had grown out of the valley floor. It incorporated caves, used natural rock formations, and worked with the terrain so completely that from certain angles, it was hard to tell where the landscape ended and the fortification began. "It looks like it's been here forever," one of the alien observers noted. "That's the point," Stone replied. "The best fortress isn't the one that fights its environment. It's the one that becomes part of it." As a final touch, the humans installed a series of simple rain catchments and wind turbines, not for powering force fields or quantum barriers, but for providing basic utilities. Unlike the alien fortress's constant power requirements, the human structure would continue functioning even without external energy input. "Primitive," Brightclaw muttered, watching the humans put finishing touches on their creation. No, Stone corrected him. Not primitive. Proven. As if to emphasize his point, another earthquake rolled through the valley. The alien fortress's quantum fields flared dramatically as its AI systems compensated for the movement. The human fortress simply swayed slightly, its stones shifting minutely along pre-calculated lines, before settling back into position exactly as it had been designed to do, exactly as similar structures had been doing on Earth for thousands of years. The day of testing dawned bright and clear, which immediately made Major Stone suspicious. In this valley, perfect weather usually meant something worse was coming. Admiral Brightclaw stood on his floating platform, scales gleaming with confidence as he announced the test protocols. "We will begin with standard weapons, then progress to increasingly advanced systems. The final test will involve what we call a quantum cascade event, something your primitive sensors cannot even detect. Wonderful, Stone muttered, checking the sky again. Hey, Hamish, what's the saying about Scottish weather? The old builder grinned. If you can see the mountains, it's going to rain. If you can't see them, it's already raining. Right on cue, the first drops began to fall. The initial tests were almost insulting in their simplicity. Kinetic projectiles, plasma bursts, and energy beams, the kind of attacks the alien fortress swatted away like annoying insects, its quantum shields flickering with barely noticeable effort. The human fortress absorbed or deflected each hit with significantly less flash but equal effectiveness. The stepped walls broke up energy beams, the angled surfaces deflected kinetic impacts, and the carefully engineered gaps in the structure channeled force away from critical areas. Primitive but functional Brightclaw conceded, watching as a plasma burst dissipated harmlessly across a seemingly ordinary stone wall. But now we progressed to more sophisticated attacks. The next wave brought autonomous attack drones, swarm weapons, and what the aliens called smart munitions. The alien fortress's AI systems had a field day, creating beautiful displays of counter-swarm tactics and point defense. The human fortress, meanwhile, seemed to be doing nothing. Crics chirped triumphantly. Their primitive defenses are helpless against modern. Wait, where did the swarms go? The attack drones had vanished into the heavy rain that was now falling steadily. Those that emerged seemed confused, their sensors struggling with the combination of water, carefully placed sonic dampeners, and the fortress's deceptively complex geometry that scattered their targeting signals. Weather's rough, on electronic. Stone commented mildly. Especially when the rain is slightly acidic from all that limestone we used in the walls. Funny thing about limestone in rain. The remaining drones began dropping from the sky, their control systems scrambled by the combination of natural and engineered interference. Brightclaw's scales shifted to an annoyed orange, escalating to gravitic weapons. The alien fortress performed spectacularly against the gravity attacks, its quantum fields warping space itself to neutralize the threats. The human fortress tilted slightly, then settled back. Distributed load-bearing structure, Maya explained to the bewildered alien observers, can't disrupt the gravity of something that's designed to work with gravity shifts. Thunder rolled across the valley as the storm intensified. The alien fortress's shields were creating magnificent light shows with each defensive action, while the human structure simply endured, water flowing through its carefully designed channels, every feature serving multiple purposes. Enough, Brightclaw declared. Time for the quantum cascade. The air itself seemed to warp as the alien weapon activated. Reality rippled like a pond disturbed by a stone. The alien fortress's defenses rose to meet it, quantum fields battling quantum fields in a display that hurt the eyes to watch. The human fortress continued existing.
Impossible, Crick screamed, all four arms frantically checking readings. The quantum effect should be tearing apart their molecular bonds.
About that, Stone said, watching as water continued to flow through their fortress's channels. Turns out there's something interesting about the crystalline structure of certain earth minerals under pressure. Dr. Torres, would you explain? Maya stepped forward, grinning. The specific arrangement of atoms in our locally quarried stone, combined with the stress patterns we built into the structure, creates what you might call a naturally occurring quantum stability field. We didn't build quantum defenses into our fortress. We built our fortress out of quantum defenses. The aliens stared in shock as their ultimate weapon dissipated, leaving both fortresses intact. But nature wasn't done with the demonstration. A major earthquake, the largest yet, rocked the valley. The alien fortress's AI went into overdrive, its power systems straining to compensate for the movement. Alerts began blaring as backup systems kicked in. The human fortress swayed, shifted, and settled, its ancient yet modern design working exactly as intended. Water sloshed in its dampening channels, stones moved microscopic distances along predetermined paths, and the entire structure moved with the earth rather than against it. Then the power went out. Lightning had struck somewhere critical, and the alien fortress's quantum fields flickered and died. Emergency power kicked in, but the constant compensation for the continuing earthquake was draining it rapidly. Reroute all power to critical systems, Brightclaw ordered, his scales now a panicked white. Sir Crix responded, "I don't think."
That's when the mudslide hit. The humans had known it was coming. It was part of why they'd designed their water channels the way they had, why their foundations were shaped like boat hulls, why they'd planted certain types of vegetation in specific patterns.
The alien fortress, for all its advanced technology, had to rely on emergency power to prevent being swept away. The human fortress split the flow around itself like a rock in a stream, channeling the mud and water through predetermined paths that actually reinforced parts of its structure. As the chaos subsided, the alien fortress stood dark and quiet, its quantum defenses offline, its AI system scrambling to reboot with limited power. The human fortress remained solid and secure, water draining through its channels, mud sliding harmlessly past its barriers. Stone walked over to where Brightclaw stood, staring at his powerless fortress. "You know what the real difference is, Admiral? Your fortress was designed to triumph over nature. Ours was designed to survive it. On Earth, survival always trumps triumph. But our technology," Brightclaw stammered.
"Is incredible," Stone agreed. "Truly amazing. But you designed it for environments you can control. We designed ours for Earth. And if there's one thing humans learned early, it's that you never, ever assume you can control Earth."
The rain began to ease as the storm passed. The human fortress had accumulated some mud and debris, but every feature that looked like damage was actually performing a specific defensive function. It hadn't just survived the combined assault of alien weapons and natural disasters, it had used them. "Would you like to talk about those FTL drives now?" Stone asked pleasantly, as the sun broke through the clouds and a rainbow appeared over the valley. Brightclaw's scales shifted through several colors before settling on a thoughtful blue. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "we should discuss a cultural exchange program first. I believe we may have underestimated certain aspects of human engineering. 3 months after the challenge, the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council had undergone some interesting renovations. Gone were the purely energy-based walls, replaced by a hybrid system that incorporated principles from Earth's ancient architecture. The previously floating platforms were now supported by elegantly engineered physical structures that looked suspiciously like Gothic flying buttresses. Admiral Vex Brightclaw, his scales now a humble shade of blue, stood before the council presenting his final report. "In conclusion, our assessment of human defensive capabilities was incomplete." "That's a diplomatic way of putting it," Elder Luminara commented, her tendrils pulsing with amusement. "Please continue." "The humans have already begun collaborating with our engineers to create hybrid defense systems that combine our quantum technology with their architectural principles. The results have been remarkable." The holographic display showed new fortress designs spreading across the galaxy. Alien quantum shields now worked in harmony with physical structures designed to channel and disperse force naturally. Power requirements had dropped by 80%, while overall effectiveness had increased dramatically. "Though I must admit," Brightclaw added, his scales shifting to a curious purple, "something about their eagerness to share their primitive techniques bothers me." Major Stone, now serving as Earth's military attached to the Council, stood at the back of the chamber trying not to smile too obviously. He caught Hamish's eye, and the old Scottish builder gave him a knowing wink. "If I may," Stone said, stepping forward, "there's something we should probably mention now that we're all friends here." The chamber grew quiet. "That fortress we built? The one that impressed you all so much?" Stone paused for effect. "That was actually our backup plan." Brightclaw's scales went completely white. "What?" "Oh yes," Stone continued cheerfully. "You see, we figured you'd be watching us build, so we used techniques that would look appropriately primitive while still getting the job done. But if you'd actually attacked..." He pulled out his tablet and projected a new set of designs. The council chamber erupted in shocked whispers as they saw the real human defensive plans. Plans that made their test fortress look like a child's sandcastle. "You see," Stone explained, "humans have been building fortresses to defend against other humans for thousands of years. And humans, begging your pardon, are significantly more creative about breaking things than your weapons developers." The design showed layered defenses that made the test fortress look straightforward. Trap systems that could have turned the entire valley into a weapon. Defensive features so subtly integrated into the landscape that even now, most of the aliens couldn't spot them in the surveillance footage. "We didn't show you these initially because, well, we didn't want to seem threatening," Stone said diplomatically. Also, some of these designs are still technically classified from various wars. But now that we're allies, Elder Luminara's tendrils were practically tying themselves in knots. You're telling us that what we saw, what impressed us so much, was your restrained version. Had to be Hamish chipped in. Couldn't exactly show you the nasty stuff before we knew if you were friendly. Now could we? The nasty bright claw started, then stopped. His scales shifted through several colors rapidly. The fortress that survived our quantum weapons and used our own attack drones against us was your restrained version. Well, we did use the weather control techniques, Stone admitted, but only the basic ones. Would have been rude to show off the really impressive stuff first time out. Weather control, someone squeaked from the council seats. That storm was, you mean you. Did you really think that lightning strike that took out your power was random? Stone asked innocently. Though I'll admit, the timing on that one was pretty good, even for us. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans hadn't just won their challenge, they'd orchestrated every aspect of it, including the environmental conditions, while appearing to simply work with natural events. Well then, Elder Luminara said finally, her tendrils now glowing with what looked suspiciously like suppressed laughter. I believe we should revise the terms of our technology exchange. It seems we have much more to learn from each other than we initially thought. Indeed, Stone agreed. Though there is one other thing we should probably mention about those primitive fortification techniques. There's more, Brightclaw asked weakly. Stone grinned. Ever heard of something humans call home alone? The confused expressions on the alien faces suggested that humanity's introduction to the galaxy was about to become even more interesting.